brothers and sisters, welcome back to The Last Dispensation. I'm your host, Troy Abels, and I would like to talk about today, if I find it. Where is it? I wrote it. Here we go. Missouri myths, Mormon lore, dogs wagging their tails. Brothers and sisters, before you call me a heretic, and before you go and you make comments on my comment section, please watch this all the way through. Please watch it all the way through. I said that in my video. The church has no official stance on the Lost 10 Tribes. And I could tell when you didn't watch it all the way through because you're making comments about things that you would have known that I said in the video, or a prophet or an apostle that I quoted. And you would have seen that I had a lot of things to back up what I was saying. So before that, before you call me a heretic, please watch this all the way through. All right. Is Zion still considered Jackson County, Missouri? Yes. Yes, it is. The pure in heart, DNC 9721. Zion also means a place where the pure in heart live. The city built by Enoch and his people that was eventually taken to heaven because of righteousness was named Zion. We find that all through the scriptures, don't we? In the latter days, a city named Zion will be built near Jackson County, Missouri, in the United States of America, to which the tribes of Israel will gather. DNC 103:11 through 22 and 133:18. But will all the saints be gathered there in the latter days? And is it the same narrative as what the prophet and apostles were saying in the early part of the church? Did you know Joseph Smith changed his view on the Missouri thing too? Okay. Let's take a look at it. The saints are counseled to build up Zion wherever they're living in the world. If that is the case, then doesn't that contradict the earlier commandment to gather to Independence, Missouri? The understanding of the doctrine of the gathering had an equally important development, and one that well illustrates the statement once made by the prophet Joseph Smith, that what is right under one set of circumstances may not be right under another. In this case, no basic doctrinal principle was involved. Rather, it was the Lord giving special instructions to his saints at that time, according to the needs and circumstances of that time. Thus runs the course of, continuous revelation. That's right, brothers and sisters. So I'm sorry. I hope I don't sound condescending. I'm not trying to sound like that. Here we go. So here's what the prophet Joseph concluded. 1844, Joseph announced with perfect clarity that all of America was Zion. All of America, not just Missouri, not just Independence, Jackson County, Missouri, but all of America. On April 8th, he declared, you know, there has been great discussion in relation to Zion, where it is and where the gathering of the dispensation is, and which I am now going to tell you. The prophets have spoke and written upon it, but I will make a proclamation that will cover a broader ground. The whole of America is Zion itself from north to south. Now that's even changed since then. Zion is we're going to find out, and we found out later that it's all throughout the earth. The Zion is where the pure in heart are gathered. Missouri myths, Mormon lore, dogs wagging their tails. There will not be left so much as a yellow dog to wag his tail. This is by Graham W. Doxey. Missouri, from the time of the settlement of Adam-on-Diamond, has been a place dear to the saints' hearts. A place important in our history and important in our future, but its vivid and turbulent history has produced myths that sometimes parallel the prophecies of its future. This is found in LDS.org. Okay. I'm not making this up. Parallel the prophecies of its future until it is difficult to untangle what the Lord has told us from things we've heard all our lives. For instance, myth number 1, we're going to walk to Missouri to prepare for the second coming. Scripture makes it clear that Missouri has a prophetic role to play in the second coming. And it seems logical that some people will need to go there to assist in portions of that work. Indeed, no doubt. No doubt that people have to go there. But the scriptures contain no references that spell out in detail how that assistance will be given. Not at all. One of the quotations I hear frequently repeated is part of a sermon by Joseph S. Smith in 1882, when God leads the people back to Jackson County. Okay, and remember, prophets aren't born in cultural vacuums. What does that mean, cultural vacuum? Let's look that up. To be born in a cultural vacuum means basically that you're not separate, that you would be separated from outside events or influences. Prophets were products of their time, so they were not separated from outside events or influences or traditions or lore. Okay? And when they receive revelation, they receive it for their time, the way their minds can understand it. And that's why we have living prophets. And that's why we follow living prophets. Okay, back to what we were talking about here. So, when Joseph S. Smith speaking in 1882, this is what he's saying. When God leads the people back to Jackson County, how will he do it? Let me picture to you how some of us may be gathered and led to Jackson County. I think I see 200,000 or 300,000 people winding their way across the Great Plain, enduring the nameless hardships of the journey, herding and guarding their cattle by day and by night. This is one way to look at it. Okay. Now, think about the time that he's speaking, and will we be really doing that? Herding our cattle and walking. It is certainly a practical view. Some might ask, what will become of the railroads? I fear that the sifting process would be insufficient were we to travel by railroads. That's found in Journal of Discourses. Now remember, Journal of Discourses in LDS.org says it's some of it is speculative in nature. This is a vivid mental picture, but people frequently remember the picture and forget he said some of us and may be gathered. We should also keep in mind that he said this is one way to look at it, remembering also the perspective of 1882. From our perspective in 1979, it seems even less likely that we would sell our automobiles and herd cattle along our freeway systems, but we simply have no scriptural information about who, if any general authority, if any general church members will be called to go back, and the means that they might use. The prophets of our day have not found it timely or necessary to speak on the matter. Myth number 2, the entire church will be gathered to Missouri. No. Here, recent prophets have been quite specific. President Spencer W. Kimball said in October Conference 1978, we are building up the strength of Zion, her cords or stakes throughout the world. Therefore, we counsel our people to remain in their native lands and gather out the elect of God and teach them the ways of the Lord. Their temples are being built, and saints will be blessed wherever they live in the world. And that was back in 1978. During the time of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, it was essential for members of the church to gather to Zion. Remember, there wasn't as many members as there are today, and they were basically a very small organization. And it was practical for people to come from England and gather. Why not? Because the Puritan, because that wasn't Zion. Zion was because they, this is where we were, and we were small enough, and we needed to grow in numbers. For their own spiritual and physical safety. But now that temples, welfare projects, educational facilities, genealogical research libraries, and the blessings of a full church organization and stakes are available, this gathering is no longer required or wise. And although the church purchased some Clay County land last December, it was solely for investment purposes, not for other church use. At a general conference, President Harold B. Lee stressed the point made by Elder Bruce R. McConkie at the Mexico City area conference. So Bruce R. McConkie didn't think that we were all going to go to Missouri again. The place of gathering, this was Harold B. Lee stressing a point that Bruce R. McConkie made. The place of gathering for the Mexican saints is in Mexico. And so it goes throughout the length and breadth of the whole church. Japan is for the Japanese. Korea is for the Koreans. Australia is for the Australians. Every nation is the gathering place for its own people. Of course, there will be special functions of the temple in Jackson County, but worldwide gatherings of the saints to Missouri may not be necessary or desired. After all, the mission of members is to always share the gospel with the non-members who surround them throughout the world. And this activity will undoubtedly continue until after the second coming. Elder Harold B. Lee further cautioned the saints in all lands to be guided by the current prophet, not by rumor or supposition, and look forward to the instruction that shall come to them from the first presidency of this church as to where they shall be gathered, and not be disturbed in their feelings until such instruction is given to them as it is revealed by the Lord to the proper authority. Myth number 3. But won't there be immense destructions in Missouri preceding the second coming, so extensive that not a yellow dog will be left to wag his tail? It's true that destruction throughout the earth is one of the conditions prior to the second coming. Yet, as far as destruction in Missouri is concerned, there are two schools of thought among members. One believes that it has already taken place. Elder B.H. Roberts published a reported prophecy of Joseph Smith to Alexander Donovan, his lawyer in Missouri. According to Donovan's brother-in-law, writing the incident over 70 years after it occurred, Joseph Smith warned Donovan that God's wrath hangs over Jackson County, and you will live to see the day when it will be visited by fire and sword. The fields and farms, houses will be destroyed, and only the chimneys will be left to mark the desolation. Sounds like the Civil War, doesn't it, brothers and sisters? Sounds like that already came to pass. General Donovan said to me, his brother-in-law continued that the devastation of Jackson County during the Civil War forcibly reminded him of this remarkable prediction. Elder Roberts cites additional descriptions of Jackson County's role during the Civil War as fulfillment of this prophecy. The other school of thought on the so-called yellow dog prophecy is that, and I've heard this one so many times, is that some members feel it is yet to occur. However, a study of the supposed source of the prophecy is helpful. It seems to have originated in a conversation between Heber C. Kimball and Amanda H. Wilcox in Salt Lake City in May 1868. I almost said 1968. 1868. She reports him as saying, the western boundaries of the state of Missouri will be swept so clean of its inhabitants that, as President Young tells us, when we return to that place, there will not be left so much as a yellow dog to wag his tail. This is found in Prophetic Sayings of Heber C. Kimball to Sister Amanda H. Wilcox. There seem to be a number of questions about the authenticity of this account, since Heber C. Kimball was apparently in Provo, not Salt Lake, during the month of May. Also, no other record exists of Brigham Young making a similar statement. However, it is sufficiently similar to Joseph Smith's statements, except for the yellow dog, that someone may have remembered the original substance, but in the retelling, allowed embellishment to creep in. That happens. Happens a lot, brothers and sisters. There are things in the church that we think are gospel doctrine that are not, that are considered lore. And through tradition, and because of the internet now, we find that it was a tradition to think these ways. But then when you get down to dissecting the scriptures on them and trying to find solid evidence of where these things derived, you find that it is lore. The above are only 3 of the myths associated with Missouri's prophetic future. Why did they arise? One reason may be that early church members, disappointed in their efforts and suffering from their wrongs, welcomed statements describing their future success in Missouri. Like, we're going to get back there. We're going to take back Missouri. Another may be that the word of mouth method of transmitting much information in the early church fostered the establishment of casual and possibly incorrectly heard remarks as doctrine. But regardless of our human logic and limited point of view, regardless of what may have been previously repeated innumerable times, we can be sure that the Lord's will on this and all other subjects pertaining to our welfare will be made known through his living prophet. Through his living prophet. One thing we do know, there is no call to gather to Missouri. And above all, I know that the living prophet's vision is both perfect and sufficient for our day. So, brothers and sisters, I know that Missouri is part of a Latter-day plan. Independence, Missouri, there is a temple plot there. We will have the temple built there, and there will be those who will be called to work there, and it will be it's the scriptures say, I think, out of the law will go forth out of Zion, and the gospel, I'm paraphrasing, will go forth from Jerusalem in Israel. Let me look that up. Okay, so that's Isaiah chapter 2, verse 3. For out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. Okay, thank you, brothers and sisters. And that's it.